Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hello.
Just a couple housekeeping things. We'd ask that you stay on mute during the presentation. If you have questions, please post them in the chat. We have Spanish interpretation here for you today, and we also are using the live transcripts. So if you don't see the transcripts, you need to just click on the button to be able to view that, but you should be able to see that hopefully. And we're really excited to have you here. I don't think I introduced myself. I'm Sally Flashberger. I work for the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities. I lead what's called the Living Well Grant. And we are excited because housing is an important topic for BPDD, but also within the Living Well Grant. And I'll let my co-workers from BPDD introduce themselves really quickly, and then we'll get started. So Caitlin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Caitlin McNamara. I'm the project coordinator on the Living Well team, and I work on this project with Sally, and I do some other odd jobs at BPDD, and I'm happy to be working on this housing webinar series.
And Tammy, how about you?
Hi, I'm Tammy Jackson. I work for the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities, and I'm their public policy person and legislative liaison.
Excellent. So we're really glad to be here today. Just to give you a little bit of information, you know, we have why we decided to present these webinars on housing. We've seen a lot of different options coming out in the community, and we know that this is a really important piece for families and people with disabilities to really be thinking about how your loved one or yourself can be living in the community as independently as possible. And we know that that is complicated. It's not an easy thing to figure out. I am the parent of a young man with a developmental disability who still lives at home, and we are in the throes of trying to figure that out too. So we wanted to bring you as much information over the course of the next 4 weeks of how you can kind of get started moving down that path. And, you know, we're not going to be able to solve all the world's problems, but we certainly are going to give you a good start to be thinking about how you or your family member can live in the community as independently as possible and hopefully overcome any of the barriers that you might be facing currently or that you might find as you move through the system. We know in Wisconsin that there are many people with disabilities living independently in apartments, in homes. And so we're really excited to give you as much information about that and get you on the right path to living in the community. So I'm going to turn it over to Tammy. She's going to introduce our speakers for today.
It's my pleasure to introduce two fabulous folks who have a ton of information for families and people with disabilities interested in living in the community. We're going to hear first from Lauren Dettmer, who works for Love Inc. She is a community organizer and has worked in a lot of different settings with people with IDD in the past. She's currently the main facilitator for the Moving On workshop at Love, which really takes families through the whole planning process of, hey, I think I want to move out into the community. What do we need to do to get there? And she really enjoys working with families and supporting them through all of the different transitions that their loved ones make during that process. And the second person we'll be hearing from is Kathryne Auerback from Movin Out. Kathryne joined Moving Out. She's the executive director and has been the executive director since 2018. Movin Out is a Wisconsin nonprofit organization that partners with people with disabilities, their families, and allies to create and sustain community integrated, safe, affordable homes. Kathryne has more than 30 years of experience leading changes for healthy and more equitable organizations. And she is extraordinarily knowledgeable about all the ins and outs of housing. So I think you're really going to get a lot of great information from both of our speakers. And with that, I will turn it on over to Lauren.
Perfect. Thank you, Tammy. And thank you, BPDD, for hosting this and putting this opportunity on, because I definitely think it is very needed. So I'm going to share my screen with you all. Okay. I'm assuming everybody can see it. As Tammy said, my name is Lauren Dettmer. I'm the community organizer with Love Inc. We are located in Dane County, but we are a family. For those who are unfamiliar with what Love Inc. is, it stands for Living Our Visions Inclusively. We are a family-led organization based in Madison, Wisconsin. We were founded in 2007 by a group of families whose true focus was connecting individuals with disabilities to their communities. So outside of school, outside of employment, how do we connect them to each other and to their communities they're currently living in? We are currently in about 14 counties around the state now. In some capacity, majority of the time it is just like through groups, parent connections, or individuals who have attended some of our webinar workshops or our housing workshops. So a little bit about our history on the Moving On workshop. So we had families express a lot of concern. One of the things that we saw as a problem was that we had families express concerns and questions about the moving on process for their loved one and what that could look like. So in 2014, the creation of our Moving On workshop took place. And I will be kind of using the term moving out and moving on kind of interchangeably, even though they are the same thing in our realm. So some of the concerns our families expressed were, we don't even know how to approach it. We don't know how to start planning. We don't know even where to start planning. The safety of their loved one and what that's going to look like when they are outside the family home. How they could afford the moving out process and living independently outside the family home. And then lastly, what cares or supports are needed for their loved one to be successful. So the overall goal of our Moving On workshop series is for people to walk out with a concrete plan, budget identified, apartments or areas of interest that they want to live in, identifying and knowing what supports are going to be needed for that to be successful. And then also just having like a general timeline and time frame for that works for them and their family. And one thing that really sets our planning or moving out process apart is we really give the families resources and tools to be successful. And we give families opportunity to connect and explore different programs and different services that are available to them in their area. Plus you get the expertise and the guidance of a facilitator as well as other families that are participating to connect with. One of the things I always like to talk about for information is the risk versus rewards. We have a lot of families that they want the timing to be perfect. They want everything to be truly, truly perfect for when their loved one moves out. But that's not always the case. We are currently at the end of a pandemic, which obviously messed up a lot of individual family timelines, and recognizing that it might be more work up front, but in the long run, it's really going to create a comfortable space for your loved one and where they feel established and connected to themselves. So our workshop series is a 5-part series. We kind of break it down, which I will show you here shortly, but kind of just our workshop in numbers. So it started in 2014. We have successfully supported 60 plus families through the Moving On workshop process. We've had about 20 of those members move out of their family home. This is a really big deal, and something we're always updating our data on because we like to know where they're at. We've had participants in 3 different counties that I know of. And then we also have had, the majority of our members are in that like 18 to 40 age range who participate. We are seeing an increase of like 18, 19-year-olds, those in the high school transition, starting to think what's gonna life like after high school. So as I stated earlier, this is a 5-part series. I'm going to go through it. But the one thing that we do before our workshop even takes place and it even starts is our series starts with a phone conversation where the facilitator, the family, and their loved one have a conversation with the facilitator, and a lot of questions are asked about what their dream situation is like. In a perfect world, no pandemic, no financial worries, what is your dream situation and your dream scenario for your loved one moving out? And we get all sorts of options. We hear like, we would love to purchase them a home really close to ours so that we can go visit. I've heard my loved one's going to need 24/7 care because, you know, when that time comes, and like it will be perfectly funded and staffed all the time, we won't have to be concerned about it. But a lot of what I hear is they want to become the parents again. They want to become mom and dad. They don't want to be the primary caregiver. They want to step away and kind of get to build that relationship with their son or daughter or loved one outside of the family home, and what that is going to look like for them. So our first workshop really focuses on the priorities. So everybody's priorities are different. But this first workshop is really about getting excited, getting those nerves out, because there's nerves on both sides, both the loved one side as well as the parent caregiver side. We introduce terms, concepts that are going to be seen over the course of the workshop. And one of the things that a lot of our families really enjoy is the priorities worksheet. So this is where families really get to share their concerns, you know, about their loved one moving on. And one of the things I always tell families, because the number one main concern is they're not going to do what is needed. It's not going to be perfect. What if this happens? What if they eat ramen noodles every meal for 3 weeks? What if they only eat McDonald's? And those things happen. And recognizing that even outside of the disability world, like we've all been there. I know when I moved out and I moved in my own space when I went to college, like I ate chicken nuggets for every meal and it was fine. And I stayed up way too late and I learned those lessons. And those are things that our loved ones have to learn and they have to grow through and they have to process through. But our main concern is how do we support them through this transition and living independently, and what that's like for them. So our next, so one of the things that we do is this priority worksheet. And I encourage my families that I support to fill it out independent. So I have the young person or the member fill it out, and then also the parent and guardian fill it out. And then I wanted them to come together and see where their priorities overlap. A perfect situation that I actually just experienced this last time around is where the mom's focus was and where the daughter's focus was 2 very different things, which is pretty common. But the daughter's priorities were way bigger than the mom's priorities. And so the mom was almost like, well, it's great. Like I recognize that I don't have to worry about that because it's already on my daughter's radar. So she's already worried about it. So just kind of seeing those conversations happen and starting to happen really take effect in this first workshop. So we obviously have them check where their priorities lie. And then we have them narrow it down to 5. And this is really hard for a lot of families. because you have everything from location, I want to live somewhere cool and interesting, to caring. So I want to be people around, around people that I love and enjoy. But also, like, I always think of like the personal care aspect. I want to feel safe in my house. So one thing that I always focus on at the end of each of our workshops is interim goals. This is a really important part for our workshop series because it allows the conversation to continue between workshops. So our workshops are about 2.5 hours, but recognizing that they're every other week. So you have a lot of time together as a family to kind of just continue those conversations that have already started. And then we usually check in on those goals at the start of our next workshop. But I always encourage families to talk about it while they're driving, while they're, hanging around the dinner table, or watching shows together, just to continue those conversations. Our next workshop is workshop 2, brings our supports and resources into play. I believe part of this webinar series, actually some of the supports are coming in to present. So I'm gonna let them speak what they do in future webinars. But the big things that we bring in are both the support checklist and the independence checklist. The support checklist allows families to see where they are and where those supports are truly needed. We've had families come in and say, I need 24/7 care. My son or daughter is never going to be able to live independently without 24/7 care. And really boiling it down to where they're independent and where their supports are still needed is a very key aspect, because a lot of times you can take the care down from 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to maybe they really only need someone checking in to help prepare meals, to help with grocery shopping, meal prep, showering, and maybe it is going from 24 hours a day to 5 hours a day. And that's a big difference, especially in terms of funding. So the first thing we have them do is the independent worksheet. It is a lot of questions, as you can see. So this is talking about, can they be alone in the room? What are periods that they can be alone, not with somebody else? Can they be alone in the community? What does that look like? Oh, sorry, guys. And then from this worksheet, we go to the next aspect, which is our support checklist. And the support checklist, this is a very basic one. I'll show you the link that breaks it down extremely. But this is where families can kind of check, like, are they independent? Is a family member currently providing that service? Are they having paid supports? Is it something a friend or a volunteer or a neighbor can help with? And obviously, if it's not applicable, or maybe somebody else is providing that support. We also break it down into a very extensive list, as you can see. So this is just a screenshot of just some of the ideas that we often suggest parents and families look at. So this one is obviously daily living and under food and meals. And the parents can just kind of go through and check, where their loved one is. And the loved one can also go through and check where they're at. The thing about these that are really nice is it allows families to create a kind of a to-do list and skills that they want their loved one to learn.
How was you doing today, like behavior-wise? Good. Yeah, really good.
Oh. So something
Is that in our bathroom mirror too? Like,
it allows the
Excuse me
families.
just a second. We'll make sure you get muted, but can everybody please make sure they're muted?
Thank you, Sally. This checklist breaks things down, but then it also helps families create to-do lists or to learn lists, as I like to put them, for things they want their loved one to know for the independent living in the future, for both the families as well as the participant to be comfortable. Our next workshop is funding. This is kind of where we go through and we create, we work with you to kind of create a budget. Majority of our participants are IRIS funded. We have supported a few families with family care or as private pay options. But this is where really we go through and look at what funding is available for savings. We bring in a financial, a special needs planning attorney who breaks down IRIS, funding, ABLE accounts, SSI, SSDI, all of the opportunities for families, and to help them save for this process, because we recognize that it's not necessarily a cheap process to go through. And they want to make sure that everybody is going to be financially secure when the process takes place. But the one thing we also do is we start creating a budget and building a budget. And this is all of the little expenses that you don't necessarily think about for your loved one. So you can kind of see in the next slide, what are some expenses that are going to come up? Obviously rent. We talk about some energy assistant programs that are available in our state. But we also have the fun ones like cable, internet, Disney Plus, groceries, cell phone. Like what do they need to be successful financially by themselves? So, we give a few different samples, but then we also give you this worksheet to kind of fill out on your own and play with on your own to kind of see where the monthly expenses are going to be and what options are available for you. Obviously, we have food share options. We talk about income sources, and then obviously the energy and assistant programs that I covered as well. But I love looking at all of the budgets. It's always really interesting because you get like this person needs a Target budget. And so that's something that's really important for, your loved one. Like maybe they want to walk to Target every day and spend $5. Building a budget that works for them, that is very personalized for them, is really beneficial for a lot of our families. Everything from haircuts, transportation, eating out and fast food is always a very big budget item for a lot of our families, because a lot of our loved ones like having the independence of like, I want to order pizza because it's Monday and mom and dad aren't here to tell me I can't. So setting aside that funding so they have that freedom and that independence to do so. Okay, workshop 4. Workshop 4 has a few different parts. One thing we bring in is our family panel. And one of our important aspects of our workshops is that connection to other families who have gone through the process. That is something that Love Inc. always feels very strongly about. How can we connect families to one another? And so hearing the good, bad, and the ugly experiences, because we've all had them, puts families' mind at ease a lot of time. We have a lot of families who come in and they're like, well, my son or daughter doesn't dress how I want them to dress, because their support puts them in outfits that I don't want them wearing. But then we have siblings come in and we're like, but mom, like, so-and-so is wearing age appropriate clothes for their age, and that's okay. So yes, it might not be the outfit that you want them to wear, but it is age appropriate and it is okay for their staff to put them in it. So it is kind of fun hearing some of the biggest things that families worry about are like clothing. They're not wearing the right stuff, or they're not eating the right food. They're not eating their fruits and vegetables every day. I can guarantee you, I don't eat my fruits and vegetables every day either. But I don't have my mom or dad calling and being like, are you eating your fruits and vegetables? And just recognizing that's part of growing up. We also talk about ideal neighborhood and housing conditions. And we start talking about some housing searches, apartment searches, what they want their space to look like, and where they want to be in proximity to everything around them. So work, family, friends, what amenities do they want in their apartment? Do they want a pool? Do they want a fitness center? Obviously transportation. Do they feel comfortable taking the bus? Is the bus something, that's close. Bus stations, bus stops are close to them. Can they walk to the grocery store? So things that are obtainable for them to live independently. And then we always gather different interests in touring apartments. We have a lot of members, especially in the Madison area, who live in different living spaces. And so we try to gather as much interest and either do virtual tours or in-person tours for, what situations the family wants to live in. So one of the things that I always encourage our members who are allowing us into their apartments to do is, like, I often tell them, be like, don't clean it. I don't want it to be spotless. I don't need it to be like perfect, because that's not ideal. We want these to be very lived in spaces that families are seeing, so they can kind of create that better picture for what it could look like when their loved one lives independently. And one of the things that, they might see is there might be dishes in the sink. There might be laundry that needs to be folded. Beds might not be made. Bathroom might not be perfectly cleaned, but they're lived spaces, and they're very real lived spaces. And I think that's really important for families to see, is everything's not going to be perfectly clean all the time, and that's okay. And then also, one of the things that I encourage families to look at when they're looking at apartments and these living spaces where we currently have members living is seeing the technology systems in place and the safety systems in place, and seeing what they look like in that real space is really, really important. Tammy, I believe you guys are bringing in Night Owl. Okay. So Night Owl is a wonderful service. We bring them in to talk to our families as well. But Night Owl has a lot of great technologies and systems in place. And so seeing what those look like in real living spaces is really effective for families, because you wouldn't ideally even know that they're there majority of the time, which is great. Here are some different ideal housing conditions and neighborhood conditions and some questions we ask. So we type everything in from, flooring space, flooring type, number of bedrooms, shared living spaces, to, what they want in their neighborhood, swimming pools, employment opportunities, fitness centers, and everything like that. So, and then we also try to narrow it down with the help of Google. We try to find some apartments in different areas that would be beneficial for families. And then lastly, our fifth workshop is really bringing everything together. So we help families build a timeline for the moving on process. And we recognize that everybody's timeline is going to look very different. We are never saying that by the end of the workshop, your loved one's in an apartment living independently, because we recognize that's not ideal. So like I said, we had a few families who were, their loved one was 18 when they were participating in the workshop, and they recognized that this might be a 3-4 year process for them, and that's okay. But we really build a timeline that works for you, for your family, and then also allowing some wiggle room. We couldn't plan a pandemic happening. We had a lot of loved ones move home in the pandemic. So what does that look like in a post-pandemic life, or even in the current state we're in? We also start looking at some applications, different apartment applications, information needed to apply. And then we start talking about making decisions for your family and what those look like. So we've had everything from, mom and dad are going to stay on the couch every other night for 3 weeks for, to help their loved one transition, to mom and dad are kicked out of my apartment after 2 nights because we want to live by ourselves away from them. So we've had all situations, all scenarios. We have a lot of families that their loved one will go to apartment during the day and help them transition. And then by the time, and then they come back to the family home for sleep, dinner and sleep. And eventually they start spending, you know, 1 night a week at the apartment, and then 2 nights. And then by the end, you know, in a few months, that they're living and they're going home to mom and dad's randomly for dinners or to hang out. We have a lot of families who come in and they're like, yeah, I get asked to go into, like, hey, can I come over to your apartment and like hang out? And I get asked for a cup of water because you become a guest in your son or daughter's apartment. And I think that's always that's a big end goal for families, is becoming a guest in their space. Is a really fun and end goal for a lot of our families. And then, so here's kind of a timeline of our, you know, suggest a timeline. We always want you to put a person responsible, and then when you're going to obtain it by. So we have budgeting, talking to Iris or family care managers about services needed, and budgeting for those, going through budget amendments to accomplish those, anything like that. And then lastly, one of the things is we do a young adult track. So here are some of the, on the slide, you can read some of the things we cover in the young adult track. But this is a member only track. So no parents are invited, no caregivers are invited. It is literally just for the participants or the members. And this really is a discussion-based group. They build connection with each other because they're going through the same process. We've had people meet future roommates actually during this process, which is really exciting. But it really allows for our members' voices to be heard separate from the families. You know, their concerns are very different from, you know, their mom, dad, primary caregivers' concerns. So allowing them to express their concerns, their visions, and giving them the space, they feel really included in the process. And then it makes the process overall just a little bit easier for them in the future. Okay, I think that is it. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. My email is on the screen. We usually hold our workshop about twice a year, and so we'd love for you to participate. But really the important thing is, the important thing for us as an organization was creating a plan to ensure success for each of our families who participate. And that's like our biggest goal. So yes, okay. I see there's a question. I don't know, Tammy, if there's time for questions or if we want to wait till the end.
I think we should transition to Kathryne's presentation and we can get to questions at the end. But the question was about how do I build this into my budget? So maybe put that in your brain to think about it.
And Lauren, if you want to answer those in the chat too, that'd be fine.
Yeah, I can definitely do that.
Do you have workshops throughout Wisconsin? I am in the Valley, and to my knowledge, we don't have anything like this.
Great question, Mike. And we will have Lauren put that in the chat. I think that is one of the things, is trying to find more providers who are doing something similar.
All right, thank you so much. My name is Kathryne Auerback, and I am the Executive Director of Movin Out. I'm very happy to be here with you today. Thank you so much to Sally and the team for inviting me, and I'm really excited to talk with all of you this afternoon about the topic of living independently in the community. So, let's see why my slides are not advancing. Okay. So I wanted to start out by telling you just a little bit about Movin Out and what we do, and then talk a little bit in more detail about what we mean when we talk about community integrated living and independent living. So our organization we recently revised our mission statements and our vision statements and our value statements, and I'm going to share those with you today. We revised these statements very intentionally to incorporate and integrate racial equity into the very core of our organization. It's very important to us for many reasons, not the least of which is that people of color are disproportionately impacted by disability. So our vision statement, which is our dream for the future, is thriving communities inspired by people with disabilities that provide equitable, accessible, and affordable housing for all. Our mission statement, which is what we do, Movin Out advances disability justice by co-creating safe, affordable, community integrated homes. And again, I'll talk more about community integration a little bit later in the presentation. Our value statements are guiding how we do our work. So equity is one of our primary values, recognizing and disrupting disparities in housing access by empowering the most marginalized people. Community, which for us means collaborating, cooperating, and partnering to build and sustain vibrant neighborhoods. And wellness, creating and prioritizing conditions that positively impact mental, physical, and financial well-being. Our organization was founded almost 30 years ago by a group of parents of adult children with disabilities. So very similar to many of you here today. And they were interested in options for their loved ones to live in the community in regular housing, to have the opportunity to make their own choices about their daily lives. So that is really around the idea of self-determination. And then partnership and collaboration were very important because the way that Movin Out creates opportunities for independent living in the community relies on a whole system in place, right? So the supportive services system, the long-term care system, supportive service agencies, etc. So our organization now, we are a HUD approved and HUD certified housing counseling agency. That means that our housing counselors are HUD certified, highly trained. They have to pass a very difficult, challenging exam to earn that certification. We provide information and referrals free of charge to anyone who contacts us. We provide education for people who are interested in purchasing their own homes. We administer a number of down payment assistance programs. So I'll talk a little bit more about this later too, as I talk about different options for community living. And we also provide some funding for safety and accessibility modifications for people that own their homes. So far, we've helped more than 1,800 families in Wisconsin to become first-time home buyers. And those are, almost all of them are households that include someone with a disability. We also develop, meaning we build new apartments. We have developed and we operate about 1,200 units of affordable rental housing. We have about 350 more units under construction currently in different places around the state. These are all mostly in the southern half of the state of Wisconsin. Some are in process in other parts of the state as well. So our rental properties include apartments. We also have some houses and duplexes and smaller buildings, like with 4 units, 4 apartments in one building that we have available for rent. These are income qualified units. So that means that these are for households with annual income that is between 30 and 80% of the county median. So that CMI stands for county median income. You might also see AMI, which stands for area median income. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. Our supportive units in the apartment complexes that we are involved with are mixed throughout. They're not congregated or segregated in any way. They're not all on one floor or all in one wing. They're mixed throughout. And we also have a resident services coordinator on our team who helps to ensure long-term success for the renters and helps act as kind of a go-between between the property managers and supportive services, and really just advocating for our residents to make sure they have what they need to be long-term successful renters. The resident services coordinator also helps residents to create connections with their neighbors, both neighbors in the apartments as well as beyond the apartments, and to help establish those relationships in a way that really strengthens the community. This idea of asset-based community development means that we get to know the residents and what they're interested in and provide opportunities for them to take the lead on any of these kinds of community activities that might happen at the apartments. So what is community integration and why does it matter? Lots of people use the phrase community integration, and it doesn't always mean the same thing. For us at Movin Out, we have a very specific definition of that, and we feel that it's very, very important. There's a long history of people with disabilities being segregated into institutional settings. There's a quote here from a publication from 1999 that says, for most of its history, the disabilities system invested most of its money in facilities that combined housing with service provision, first in institutions and then in group homes. So that idea of having no separation between housing and service provision. So if you want to live in this particular place, you're going to get these services from this organization, and it's not up to the individual, and it's not based on their preferences or their needs. It's just kind of a package deal. And for us, that doesn't align with our values around self-determination, and it doesn't quite meet our definition of community integration. So there's a lot of information on this slide. This is essentially saying that community integration, I'm sorry, I'm just moving some of these things around on my screen so I can see my slide a little better. That for us, community integration is a matter of civil rights. And at the federal level, it's been affirmed that segregating people with disabilities can be a form of discrimination. Sorry, and the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, also stresses the importance of community integration, and states that people with disabilities have the right to receive services in the most integrated community settings possible, and that living in an integrated community and making one's own decisions is a fundamental right of all people. So we really see ourselves as a social justice organization and as a civil rights organization because of these issues. So This slide shows some of the benefits of community integration. And this is from an organization called UD Services. And the link is at the bottom of the slide there. The biggest benefit of community integration for people with disabilities is the opportunity to truly be part of the community. Regardless of disability status, everyone possesses unique talents and abilities and deserves the right to play an active role in society. So some of the benefits include building practical life skills that lead to enhanced independence, providing a path to recovery for people who feel isolated or unwanted, providing access to activities and services that are not available in segregated environments, the opportunity to engage with other people and the satisfaction of being part of a diverse community, the opportunity to learn about social behaviors and make new connections, access to inclusive workspaces where people are treated the same as their non-disabled peers. We also think it's very, very important to stress the benefits for the larger community of community integration. More diverse relationships with people who have different viewpoints and experiences, more funding for public spending when people with disabilities work and pay taxes, decreased costs associated with supporting people with disabilities through paid professionals, and the chance to experience the many gifts and talents people with disabilities possess. So when we talk about inclusion in the context of diversity and equity and inclusion, for us, we are thinking about people with disabilities as an important part of that picture. And what does a healthy, vibrant community look like? For us, it's one that is diverse, and that includes people with disabilities. So some of this will overlap a little bit with what Lauren shared with you. Our organizations collaborate, and we often actually come and talk to their Moving On groups to talk about what Moving Out has to offer. Some of the things to think about in terms of living in the community in a non-segregated, non-institutional, non-licensed setting. What kind of environment is right for you? Are you more comfortable in an urban setting or a suburban setting, or out in the country in a more rural setting? What kinds of amenities are important to you to be near your home? Employment opportunities, a grocery store, healthcare facilities, and how will you get around in your community? Is it a walkable community? Is there public transit available? Would you be comfortable living in a multifamily setting, like an apartment building or a duplex or a condo, or would you be more comfortable in a single family home? And is ownership or rental right for you? So if you are thinking about purchasing your own home, of course, there are many, many things to think about, and our housing counselors can help you determine if home ownership is an appropriate option. Some of the things to think about include your credit score and income in order to qualify for a mortgage, down payment assistance options. Moving Out, again, administers a number of down payment assistance options, and there are other organizations that also offer down payment assistance. You need to be thinking about not only moving into the house, but the upkeep and the maintenance for a house, and who will do that, who will provide that. If you own a condo, are there homeowner association fees or HOA fees? Any special assessments that might come up, that means additional taxes that you might have to pay. For example, if the street in front of your house is going to be repaved or the sidewalk is going to be repaved, sometimes residents are required to pay additional taxes. So planning ahead for those kinds of expenses is really important if you're thinking about purchasing your own home. And we have worked with clients whose primary income is Social Security income for their disability, and their there are many folks who have been able to purchase their own homes. Right now, of course, the housing market is quite challenging. The prices for homes has gone up quite a bit, and it makes it even more challenging right now. But we also are seeing some increases in down payment assistance funding available from the funders that we get those sources from. So we're able to help a little bit more. Renting an affordable home, there are income-based rental opportunities. So for example, the apartments that we're involved with are, as I said, are income restricted. The supportive units are typically based on household income that is not more than 30% of the area median income or the county median income, which is that AMI, CMI acronym that you see there. And that's roughly equivalent to what a household would be receiving if they are on SSI or SSDI. And just a little bit briefly about, I'm keeping an eye on the time here too, about some of the different kinds of subsidized housing that's available. You might have heard of Section 42 or Section 8 housing. Section 42 is also housing that is funded by a program at the federal level that's called low income housing tax credits, or LIHTC. There's a lot of acronyms. But the main thing for you to be aware of is that this is based on your income. So there may be apartments that are designated at that 30% level. Most of our apartment complexes are mixed income. So that means that there are some units that are designated for people at the 30% level and other units available for people whose income is at half of the area median income, or 50% or 60% or 80%. And then the rents are set, the maximum rents are set at the federal level. So the rent is not correlated exactly as a percentage of your income. Section 8 typically is. So that's the main difference. Section 8 can be project-based, meaning that specific units are designated or funded by Section 8 dollars, or tenant-based, which means that you may have a portable voucher that you can use at any location. And then you may also find affordable housing that is not subsidized, but it is just available at an affordable rent level. That's what we call naturally occurring affordable housing, or NOAA. So what questions should you be thinking about? What should you be looking for specifically in a rented home? You might want to think about, are people with disabilities living in no more than 25% of the units? If more than 25% of the units are occupied by people with disabilities, we feel that that becomes kind of a slippery slope toward congregation and segregation. And so we cap the number of supportive units in our projects at 25%. Are the supportive units scattered and mixed throughout the property and not clustered in any way? Again, we feel like this is a really important part of creating a diverse, inclusive community. Can I choose the provider of my support services, and can I select those services based on my needs and preferences? In other words, are housing and supportive services separate? Does the property management company have experience working with residents who are people with disabilities? And what level of resident services coordination is provided? I've got an eye on the clock here, so I'm going to keep going. Oops, sorry about that. I went the wrong way. Why should I get involved? So if you are family members or loved ones who are interested in community integrated living options in your community, It's important to get involved because it's important to plan for the future. So beyond family supports, having a plan in place like Lauren was talking about. In Wisconsin right now, there is far more demand than supply. This is really a national issue. Wisconsin in particular has only 34 affordable and available rental homes for every 100 low-income renter households. So that means that there's not nearly enough. There are misconceptions about affordable housing and low-income housing. So NIMBYism, NIMBY stands for not in my backyard. So there are many people who say that they're supportive of affordable housing, but they don't want it close to where they live. So that can create barriers for communities to be more inclusive. And then zoning in communities, which can really lock out any kind of multi-family affordable housing. You can help. Sorry, it looks like, sorry about that. I've got some duplication on here. You can get involved by finding out if there is an affordable housing committee or task force in your community. You can contact your city council person or your alder person and let them know that you are supportive of affordable housing in your community, and in particular, affordable housing that includes supportive units. It's also very, very helpful for folks to attend public meetings and voice your support for any affordable housing projects that might be proposed for your community. And then certainly to vote. We're coming up on the primary elections in Wisconsin. So make sure you're registered to vote and vote for people who support bringing more affordable housing to your community. So as a kind of a quick run through, I know we're almost out of time and I can see there's a lot going on in the chat, but I'll stop sharing there so that our host can resume. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yep, there's quite a few questions. I'm going to go from the bottom up. Is that good? Someone wants to know, what is a reasonable time frame for obtaining income restricted housing? They've been on waiting lists in Dane County and it's hard to find out. So I think that is always a question, but it's different by each county, right, Kathryne?
Absolutely. Again, that figure that I cited, 34 for every 100, that's, kind of an indication of what's going on here with these waiting lists. Dane County has an enormous shortage of affordable housing. We have several projects under construction currently in Dane County. We have 2 projects under construction in Madison and 1 in Cottage Grove. The Cottage Grove project is called Glen Grove, and we actually just started applications are available for that. So you can find that information on our website, or you can contact us, and the contact information is in the chat there, and they'll send that out also with my presentation afterward. You can contact Movin Out and get information about these projects that are under construction now. You can, for those that are under construction that are not yet leasing, you can get on an interest list. So you'll be notified as soon as the applications are available. But otherwise, it can take several years to move your way up a waiting list. Most of our supportive units are, we rarely have vacancies, let's put it that way. There's not very much turnover, which is a good thing for the people who are living there, right? Because we want housing stability, but it does create long waiting lists, unfortunately. And I've said to groups before that even if we had unlimited resources, we could not build affordable housing fast enough to meet the current demand.
I think that's why that advocacy you were talking about, getting involved with your community on the front. Someone had asked, and you might understand the question, what is the increase in support granted to buy the house above $50,000? Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, I do not understand that question.
Okay. And then somebody posted about a long-term care funder requesting they move to keep their services. And I would say just from our perspective that you might want to contact Disability Rights, if you're under 60, the Ombuds program there, and Caitlin can throw that in the chat because that really shouldn't be something that's happening. Let's see. Wait, there's another, I'm just looking. Yeah, so somebody Caitlin did post all the resources about moving out. And if someone is looking for a housing counselor, they can also talk to their care manager or their IRIS consultant and see like what might be available in their area around housing counseling. But then we also have that information in there.
And we are a statewide organization, so our housing
yep.
counselors can help folks
Absolutely.
across the state.
Great. So start with that. And I think Caitlin posted both your Spanish brochure and your English website information. I
Sally-
think that's all.
Sally,
I think.
Sally, I think our Spanish translator had a question, but for some reason we couldn't hear her.
She posted in the chat, but maybe
Okay.
I think I got it. All right. All right. Somebody also had a question about, let me just look at this. There were some HUD issues with a person living in the community and then having a caregiver. And per HUD, the live-in aid policy was only allowed one live-in aid. And I do believe that is an issue, but again, that would be an issue for Disability Rights. They would give you some advice on that for sure. But I do think there are a lot of specifics around living caregivers through HUD when you're accessing that type of housing. All right, and Caitlin posted the information about disability rights. So I think we've gotten through it. I think we've gotten through the questions. We appreciate everyone attending. Our next presentation will be next Tuesday, same time from 12 to 1. And we'll be joined by one of our IRIS consulting agencies, TMG. Also a provider who's working with the Living Well grant, ODC, and maybe one of our managed care organizations. We're still trying to finalize that, but we'll be talking more about the person-centered plan and how you can use the person-centered plan to achieve independent living. So we thank you all for joining, and we hope to see you next week and for the rest of the series. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.